All right, Jeff, let's talk about the AFC East. The Patriots are going to finish last, but then there's a lot of questions. I won't lead you into anything. Talk about your opinions on the AFC East, where you think it's going this year.
Well, if I may, I actually think it's interesting that, I wrote a story today paneling a variety of people around the league. And one of the questions was, which team do you think is going to surprise in a bad way this season? And the Cowboys were number one by kind of a wide margin. But 2, 3, and 4, I forget the exact order, were the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins.
So Miami's second, the Jets are third, and
Buffalo.
Okay.
Buffalo.
So and not only that, but like they had a good chunk of the votes. So it wasn't like a sort of a one-off or kind of a fluky result, in my opinion. It's people really thought that these teams were all a little bit overinflated. And, maybe the Bills, I think people around the league have been waiting for the Bills to take a step back for a while. And you could argue maybe they took a subtle one last season and maybe something bigger is in store this season. I was certainly wrong about that type of prediction last year. So I think Josh Allen is still the best player in the division, and that's going to carry a lot of weight. The Dolphins have these high expectations because they've got this awesome offense, but is there going to be some pressure that kind of brings them down a little bit because they still haven't done anything when it matters most? And when you start winning double-digit games and you have this impressive offense, people want to see more. And then the Jets, we know what the Jets have been capable of their the entire history of their franchise. I mean, they're a team that they either go into a season with very low expectations and they hit them, or they go into it with very high expectations and they don't necessarily meet them. So which one of those is that going to be this year? I think it's the latter. But if Aaron Rodgers is able to hold up, if the offensive line is somewhat better, there's still a lot of people who think that Aaron Rodgers could play at an MVP level. But I think it's a huge traffic jam up top, but I wouldn't be surprised if they all regress in some capacity. The Jets can't really regress, but in terms of expectations.
It's interesting because the Jets, what were the Jets, 7-10 last year with the worst quarterback in football. Are people this down on the Jets, like you mentioned, specifically because they're the Jets, because they're that organization, or is it fear of the offensive line? Because it's really the only hole in the team I can think of. It's the health of Rodgers, but I even think Tyrod Taylor, they'd have a winning record with him. So what do you think the deal with the Jets is?
A lot of that is, you ask the question and they'll say the Jets, and then somebody will just say under their breath because it's the Jets.
Right.
But, it's not like they're just throwing darts or picking, the low-hanging fruit here. There are questions about the offensive line. There are questions about how good Aaron Rodgers can play, given the amount of time that he's had off. Discounting the 4 snaps from last season, some of the stuff that went on this offseason, how committed is he necessarily to going out there and playing at a high level? So I just think there's questions with the leadership structure, as there basically always have been about the Jets, no matter which regime is in charge. So this is just an organization that, they've got a lot to like on paper, and they've drafted well, and sometimes that gets lost because they've got the star power and the acquisition of Aaron Rodgers. So there is talent there. It's just so many people have been waiting for that talent to come to fruition for so long, and it still has historically never really happened.
Also, looking at that list, San Francisco's right there also. I mean, San Francisco is taking care of some business. They have Ayuk now. They just re-signed Trent Williams. I'm not sure when you conducted this poll, how recently, but that surprises me. San Francisco is one of the classes of the NFL.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's a hard question for these guys to answer, too. Some of them will rebut, like, well, what are the expectations? Or, sometimes people will want to pull up the standings just to see, like, where they are at. Some want to look at what the betting odds are. But so, then there are the others who are like, well, I don't pay attention to what the media's expectations for this. So, like, the goalposts do move on this question. So sometimes they just look at who had success last year, who's possibly going to – I mean, you could argue that if the 49ers don't make the Super Bowl this year, they took a step back.
Well, sure.
So the bar is certainly different for everybody. In terms of when I did the poll, it started early in my training camp tour, and I got a vote as recently as yesterday. So this was over the course of, 6 or 7 weeks.
Okay, so and you went to a ton of camps, right? You went on a big camp tour.
10 or 11, I think.
Yeah. So what is the feeling on Kansas City? Do people, because, like you said, people are, I've heard too, like people doubting the 49ers. You hear people doubting Buffalo. They've lost a lot of talent. They question the coaching. Do people think Kansas City can maintain this? And if they are flawed, have they done anything to address the flaws from last year?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't really know what the flaws necessarily would be. I mean, I think they lost a little bit in the secondary, but just look at the last 2 years and the expectations going into their first season without Tyreek Hill. All right, what's that offense going to look like? Can Mahomes be disciplined enough to focus on the short game, or is he still going to force it down the field over and over again, which got him into a lot of trouble? 3 seasons ago, what have you. Then they won back-to-back Super Bowls. And, last year, I think opened everybody's eyes that, around here, and I've had the same opinion. Like, I don't want to really compare anybody to what the Patriots did. And I certainly don't want to compare anybody to Tom Brady. And I'm still a ways out from ever even considering doing that. But what you saw Mahomes do last year, overcoming the amount of adversity that they had on the field, whether it's the skill positions making boneheaded mistakes or just, ill-timed drops, which happened what seemed like 2 to 3 times every single game, especially in big moments. And then Mahomes, by the numbers, didn't have a Mahomesian sort of year, but then the playoffs come on and he had a Tom Brady-like march through the postseason last year. And it's just one of those things where it's like, oh my goodness, like if he's gotten himself, we all think as highly of Mahomes as you possibly can for any player who's currently playing right now. We're not going out on a limb here, but I just think what he did last year proves that at any point when he turns it on or when he decides it's winning time, he's virtually impossible to beat. And we saw that from Brady for so many years.
By the way, Andy Reid, you talk about Bill Belichick coming back and breaking Shula's record. Andy Reid's not, incredibly far off.
No,
from that.
That's what I kept saying, like during the whole talk of Belichick's record thing, and I wasn't the only one saying it. Like, if Andy Reid, I don't want to do the math necessarily right now, but I would think with 6 more seasons he could do it. Maybe 7 more seasons he could do it.
He's 44 behind Belichick.
Oh, he's only
he's only 44 behind Belichick.
You could do it 3. You could do it in 3.
He's 44 behind Belichick right now.
So whatever
he's
with
66.
And I'm glad you brought it up, Jeff, because whatever the comparisons with Mahomes and Brady, that's fine. But everyone's like, is Belichick going to come back next year and get the coaching record? And it's like, well, Andy Reid could run away with it. Like Andy Reid could, if he coaches, like you said, for another 7-8 years. I mean, he could be very far ahead in that. That being said, Jeff, since it's on the table, what have you thought of Belichick in the media? And is he going to be a candidate next year? Do you think he'll coach again?
Honestly, I haven't seen any of his media stuff.
It's not
Maybe
good.
Like a couple clips on Twitter. Okay. I haven't had the time. So I don't know. But I think, we saw what he did in was it the NFL 100 or the honors, whatever that was a few years ago. Like if he wants to turn it on and be great, we know he can be. In terms of what's in store for next year, it's going to continue to be a massive storyline, especially in Dallas, where McCarthy is on an expiring contract. And, this team's won 36 regular season games against 1 playoff victory in the last 3 years. So the clock's obviously ticking. I mean, there's quite a bit of apathy toward the Cowboys locally in Dallas, just because, again, like it's the whole, we're talking about, it's the Jets. Like there's a massive sentiment around the league. Like, it's the Cowboys too. And last year, I think was the low point that they've had in quite some time, where they were good enough to win the Super Bowl last year, and they laid an absolute egg in their first playoff game. And that kind of sped up the thought process. Now, there's a lot of things, in my opinion, that are going to have to happen for Belichick to get a job next cycle. And we've kind of gone through why he didn't in the last cycle. So he's going to have to prove a lot of stuff wrong. He's probably going to have to change some philosophy in terms of giving up personnel control. And I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I'm not going to predict that it'll happen, but, a year away from the game, Belichick could realize, hey, my only chance to get back here is to say, I'm going to coach, and the personnel people can do personnel stuff. But still, like, that's going to take a lot to bring him back. And you're going to have an owner who's going to say, I have a 2-year window or I have a 3-year window with this guy, max, because he'll be 75 and you can't realistically count on him coaching for more than 2 or 3 more years. So what is that going to do to your franchise long term? But if you're a team like Dallas that's in position to win year after year, assuming you can get the quarterback contract done, whether it's now or in March, that's a team that's going to still be talented enough to contend. And I think that would be attractive to Belichick. It's just Jerry Jones has said it a million times. There's no way in hell he's ever going to give up GM responsibilities. And they've got a guy in the front office in Will McClay who's as talented as evaluating player talent as anybody in the league. So they're not just going to bring in Belichick and say, you know what, everybody else is kind of just going to ride shotgun here. It's going to happen in tandem. The other, we could look at the other scenarios, Buffalo, Philly, like what happens if things go wrong with some of these talented offenses. But again, you're going to need some massive organizational restructuring. And I'm not sure how willing ownership in various places is going to be. That said, the one thing we kind of overlook in these coaching hiring cycles is we sit here and say, all right, well, the GM's in charge, or they've got this coaching searching panel or what have you. But this ultimately always comes down to the owner, with very, very few exceptions. You've got some owners who are certainly willing to take the feedback from the 10 to 15 people directly below them in terms of who the best coach might be. But this always falls on the owner. So we can sit here and give 99 reasons why Belichick might not be a perfect candidate for a certain team next season. But if that 100th reason is the ownership has final say and he wants Bill Belichick, that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I saw one thing at this year being described as a bridge year, how he's going to have a very lucrative bridge year, making all this money in these various. I'm like, I'm not convinced it's a bridge year. And Jeff, you brought up probably the most likely landing spot at Dallas. I don't know how likely it is if you're going to convince Jerry Jones to, cede some control over to Bill.
He won't.
No.
But if Bill Belichick takes the job, that's going to be awesome. Because Jeff, that Jerry Jones will just talk crap openly in the media about Belichick if they're not winning. By the way, they draft well. Like, the personnel decisions they make are good.
Right.
I mean, if you look at the way they drafted and the way they built that team, you can, it's interesting Jeff brings up the GM because you can point fingers at Jerry Jones all you want, but I mean, he's not done a bad job.
Yeah, Dak was a draft pick, Micah Parsons a draft pick, CeeDee Lamb a draft pick. They're all
the guard, the kid they took in the first round that year that was like all world. All right. Well, listen, Jeff Howe, excellent information. Everyone read Jeff Howe in The Athletic, and we appreciate the time, sir. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys having me. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
all right,
Jeff.
take it easy. There you go. The great Jeff Howe.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.